Sunday. Happy Sunday, everybody. This is Karen here, your favorite virtual assistant. Today we have a magnificent conversation, which is one that I know I heard of ADHD, but I don't know a lot about it. So I'm very excited to learn how can I support those coworkers, those people that this is what they every day, struggle that they're going through. So Gail, I'll pass you the mic. Let's get this
Hi, happy
going.
Sunday, everybody. I am Gail, your corporate training workshop facilitator. The super hero of customer service training, entrepreneurial training, all things personal and professional development. And today we are so happy to be able to have with us Christian. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. We had all those issues in the beginning, but Christian is here to tell us a little bit, as Karen said, about ADHD from personal experience, and then
Yes.
how can we have some coping mechanisms as we go into the workplace. So, Christian, welcome to our Sunday live chat. We are so happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your business, and then we'll go right into the topic. So, welcome.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here, and I just really appreciate that. Even though neurodivergence is not really the space that you operate in, you decided to bring me on and have this topic. So thank you for doing that. Really
Thank you
excited
for
to be here with you.
Thank you
Yeah.
for being here.
Yeah, of course. And in spite of the technical difficulties this morning, where we
I
all
know.
are freaking out about what was going to happen or not, but
Yeah.
so. Well, I work as a parent coach, life and parent coach. I primarily work with parents who are trying to navigate neurodivergence with their child. So I often work on behavior issues, social emotional learning, confidence, and any kind of problems that parents face on a daily basis with routines, getting ready in the morning, getting ready for bed, and all those good things, because we know that neurodivergence makes everything a little harder. And so yeah, I'm really excited about talking about ADHD. It's a hot topic, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
misconceptions about it, and there are a lot of people who um, may have ADHD but don't know about it, and
Yeah.
keep trying to figure out what's wrong with me, why am I having all these difficulties all the time. So I'm hoping that as out of today's chat, maybe there will be some people who will be inspired to seek more information,
Right.
or and that will be helpful somehow.
Yes. Thank you, Christian. But do you want to share a little bit more about your experience? Like, what made you be passionate about HDHD, and if you have any personal connection to it, so people could just have an idea of why this is
Yeah.
why you're so passionate about it.
It's really a couple of things, and it's I always have a hard time telling short stories. So how many hours do we have today? But there will be a part two, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we can have a
Yes.
part two.
If you have to, we sure will.
Well, to start with, I have ADHD. I
Okay.
didn't always know about it. I suspected for many years that I did have it, and it wasn't that much of a big deal. But about probably about 2 3 years ago, I had the symptoms were getting a little worse, and I was having a little bit of a harder time getting things done and staying on task, and there was a little more procrastination. And so I started diagnosis. Um, got a terrible psychiatrist who said, "No, you don't
Mm,
have ADHD. I think you're just anxious." Well, ADHD brings out a lot of anxiety with a lot of people. So
mhm.
I said, "Well, might be, but what about all those issues that I had as a kid, where I kept losing my stuff, and I kept being distracted, and I kept being told to pay attention, and I kept, well, we're not sure, but we don't think you have ADHD." So so I accepted that, because that's all I could do at the time, and I tried to manage, and then things got a little worse. And at some point, I thought, this just doesn't make sense. I'm With everything I've looked up online, self test, self evaluations, I do have ADHD. So I looked for another psychiatrist, found a great one who, instead of spending 10 minutes with me and determining what my issues were I
Right.
spent an hour and a half asking me questions, a lot of really insightful questions, and at the end he said, "Yeah, you absolutely have ADHD." So
Oh
uh,
wow.
even though even though I suspected it for 7 years, it, it was some level of validation, and it was
Mhm.
to help me because it just became officially this part of me that okay, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm not making it up. I'm not imagining things. I'm not so now I can really dig my teeth into it, so to speak, even more and research more information and really pay attention to what's working for me and what's not working for me. So um, so that's how I connect with it personally. And then my whole life I worked in the neurodivergent space.
Mm.
So out of college, I went into well, I'll skip that story because we don't have that much time. But I became I became an occupational therapist,
Okay.
and I worked with kids who had a lot of neurodivergent challenges. So many of them were autistic, many of them had dyslexia, had sensory processing disorder, had attention deficit, ADHD. And so to me, it was never that big of a deal because it was the environment that I worked in and day out. I spoke with
Mhm.
parents who said, "Oh yeah, I have ADHD too. My kids has ADHD," and so it was just my world. And I would be reading reports from my clients detailing their ADHD, and I would read along and go, oh yeah, I have that. Oh yeah, oh yeah, I have that problem too. Oh yeah, so it just became very
Ah,
natural for
wow.
me, although it was not a an official diagnosis. So one way or another, I've been connected to it, and I can't imagine not working in the space that I'm working in because that's
Right.
what I've done my whole life. So.
Yeah, but you're also making an impact and change, and you educating parents and people about it, which I think is very important. But those other, most of us don't. We have heard of it, heard about HJSD one way or another, right? But a lot of us don't have a personal interaction with people that have HJSD.
Mhm.
So I think that's where the difference lies when you're hearing about it, opposed to having a personal interaction with someone. And I find interesting that you went to a psychiatrist who didn't even
Yeah,
notice
that
that
one
you
was
had you
scary.
right. Like it is like it makes me wonder. There must be a lot of people that go undiagnosed because of that.
Absolutely, and it's you know this really also talks about accessibility
Mhm.
of services, of mental health services, and that can be a whole other live stream topic. But it's it took me to put it bluntly, the second psychiatrist that I went to was not covered by my insurance. I had to find someone privately,
Oh
and I
wow.
was fortunate that I could do that. But it cost me over $1,000 for the evaluation.
Right.
So not everybody can do that. There were times in my life where I couldn't have done that.
Right.
So the first psychiatrist was covered by my insurance. I didn't have to pay anything,
Right.
and so you would think that the insurance would be good enough to get you the services that you need, and didn't work.
Work
So
out.
so it is. So if there's any learning, any takeaway from that experience is for me to keep encouraging people to do some research on their own first,
Mhm.
Yes.
before going to see a professional, because no matter who the professional is, there's always the possibility that they may miss the boat for one reason or another. and
Mhm.
and
Right.
maybe they don't see that many cases of ADHD. Maybe that's not their
Mhm.
specialty, or
Right.
maybe
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
or maybe the person who's seeking out the evaluation is um, maybe has mixed diagnosis, has a combination of things, and one diagnosis is a little stronger than ADHD, and it's masking ADHD, so it's making it a
Right.
little harder for the psychiatrist to really uncover what's going on. So my encouragement to people is always to do as much research as you can online. There's a lot of different places online where you can take um, you know um, an online test to determine if you're ADHD or not. It's not going to give you an official diagnosis, but it can steer you in that direction and make you realize that, oh yeah, so it sounds like I have this problem. So that helps people to, once they go to a psychiatrist, say, hey, I definitely have difficulties with time management and with regulating
Mm-hmm.
my attention, with procrastination, with planning and organizing, with so
Mm-hmm.
make it a little easier for themselves to to advocate and to have an interaction with the professional.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you
Um,
have a question.
yeah, and what about, so I think if you're seeing signs that may suggest you have ADHD, I think it may come to the forefront more if you've also had these things as a child. Because then you're saying, but yes, I've had all these things as a child. Now I'm an adult. I still have these. Like it seems to suggest that I do have ADHD. But I take what you're saying. Sometimes the professional you go to, and they say, medicine is not an exact science, but you would think. For me, I'm listening to your story and I'm saying maybe the encouragement we need to give people as well. There's no price value you can put on your peace of mind. I would rather know than not know.
Right.
And I would somehow try to some way find that money to go to the professional, because I think I would need to know. And then how do I react and how do I move forward now based on this new knowledge I have versus not knowing? But I guess that leads into my next question. If I can't afford to go to somebody else who's not covered by my insurances, are there like support groups, or do I call Christian, or like who do I talk to? Because sometimes you only
Mhm.
need a conversation with somebody who's gone through it and who can put your mind at ease. Okay, yes,
Yeah, no,
I'm not a
that's
professional, but this is what I went through and this is
right.
what I could share based on my personal experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. Your point is a good point to talk to other people, to look for ADHD groups forums
Hmm.
online, and things that are free where talking to other people. So even if it's not an official diagnosis, but when you talk to other people who also have ADHD, you start realizing that, oh, you have that problem too. Oh, so it's not
Yeah.
just me, or I'm not just crazy. It's
Yeah.
it's a thing, and
You
and
can
so
think you're crazy.
exactly, so that's very validating. And there's an organization in the US that's called CHADD. It's an acronym. It's CHADD. And I'm blanking on the acronym. It's something children having ADD or something. And but it's for children and adults, and it's a great website. It's a great resource. There's tons of information about tips for parents, for anyone, for adults, and there's just different resources. There's some advice, and so it's a great place to start, whether or not you're seeking an official diagnosis.
Yeah. I also wanted to. Okay, so as far as people in the workplace, right? Let's say you're starting a job. So considering it's a personal matter to you, so would you say to share it with your employer or HR, for example, or just don't say anything? Because sometimes you don't want to walk in there and be weird. People could be weird. People could be very insensitive sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because they already have their own stigma, they have their own belief system.
Right.
So how can somebody navigate the spaces when it comes to sharing this, and who do you share it with? You know?
That's a $1 million question, right? So
Yeah.
tell it or not tell it. So
Right.
I think it has to be handled on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person, and it depends on the company. So,
Right.
for example, every person with ADHD is going to have a different intensity of symptoms, and the impact is going to be different for everyone.
Mhm.
So, because ADHD is also on the continuum. So some people may have a milder form of it or a more extreme form of it, and also, you know, ADHD often comes with additional diagnosis. So, someone with ADHD may have also dyslexia, or may have maybe some autism, or maybe
Right.
not some autism, but autism, and may have sensory challenges. So it's going to create a different picture. So, for me, for example, when there were a few years where I worked for someone, where I was not working for myself, and I didn't mention it because I felt I was able to manage, but also knew the environment, and I knew the environment was good enough for me to be able to be my best. But if it's a so it matters a lot about how much your symptoms are interfering with your ability to perform the job,
Right.
and so that that really realized in order to know that, we need to know ourselves the best we can.
Right.
Because if I know, for example, I know that I'm very noise sensitive in a workplace. So if I'm going to a party or a concert, I'm fine. I don't mind the noise. I don't mind the, but in a work environment, when I have to focus, and if there's noise, like if someone was talking here in the background next to me, I would have to stop everything. I couldn't focus. So for me, the noise level is something that I know about. So if I went into work for someone else, and that's that, it could be something that I acknowledge. I may say, oh, I tend to be noise sensitive, so I may be, depending on my pay grade, right? Depending on the job, I may get if I get my own office, well, that would be ideal, because I would be more in control over the noise environment and distractibility. But if I, otherwise, I may ask, would it be okay to wear noise cancellation headphones? Or I may be wearing earplugs when I really need
Right.
to focus, and it's not because I'm trying to, be rude or
Right.
that, So it really depends on what we need. For example, a lot of people with ADHD report that they they do better working standing at a standing desk. So standing desk are
Mm.
becoming a hot thing, because people are realizing, like, oh, when I stand up, it kind of like creates a little more input to my brain, and it just helps focus better. Well, for me, it doesn't work. I have ADHD and it doesn't work. Now I have friends who have ADHD and who swear that the standing desk is the best thing. So if I
Right.
work into a place and they say, "Oh, we've got you. We're going to give you a standing desk," I'm like, "No, I don't want it."
Right.
So it really depends on what we need, and whether the company is going to be um, willing to accommodate. So I would probably encourage people to do some research about that company
Hmm.
ahead of time. Maybe someone they know, or maybe talking to the HR department, or looking at how willing they would be to accommodate
Mm-hmm.
different conditions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but that's
agree.
yeah, I agree. That's definitely true because I also feel like the company might be in agreement, maybe supportive of it, right? But then the people your manager, for example, your supervisor, that's a different story. But I also do wonder, as a manager, right? Somebody who if I'm the manager of somebody who have HDHD, I think it's important to understand the person, or at least take time to understand the person, so you could leverage their strength better, right? So you could kind of work with them, put them to do tasks that they will be great at, opposed to just putting them something that they're not good at it, or they don't care to do it, or they not might be the best
Mm-hmm.
at that situation. But also maybe some form of training, or I think something else, because a lot of us, I know, when I was a supervisor, I don't know if I had employees, to be honest, because a lot of them didn't share that personal, you know,
Yeah,
they didn't
yeah,
share that. So I wouldn't know how I best could help them unless they are willing to be open with me to tell me this. And I think that part of it is also being accommodating and being open minded enough to understand and try to understand, okay, this is, I don't know what it is, but help me understand what it is. Right? Help
yeah,
me figure it
yeah.
out. How can I help? How can I support you better? I
Mm-hmm.
think those are the conversations that we need to have as well, as somebody who
Yeah.
has a management position too.
Mhm. But it
I
all
agree.
goes back to communication, which is what Chris was
Yeah.
saying. Like, I'm saying you need to communicate because I can't read your mind. I wouldn't know. I might think, oh, this behavior may be kind of strange or weird, but I
Right.
don't know what's happening behind it. And I had a
Right.
question for Christian, and I know we have some other questions in the comments as well.
Hmm.
So, Christian, in terms of me applying for a job at a company, I'm trying to do my research, but there's nothing online that says to me they are inclusive of people with ADHD or autism or whatever the case is. Then maybe during the interview, I should ask, oh, so do you have anything in place to manage people who work for you who have ADHD or who have, who are autistic,
Yeah.
or, what do you have in place to cover these kind of situations? And if they say yes, great. So what about your team? Is your team on board? Do they know how to manage
Hmm.
me? I'm
Right.
not saying that I have it, but, do they have plan? Because they ask you at the interview any other questions. That would be one of my other questions. What are
Right.
you actively doing to include people in your organization who have special requirements? Like you said, everybody may not want a standing desk, everybody may not want
Yeah.
noise. It's not that I can't work or I'm not a performer who goes above and beyond. It's just that I need a special environment to be able
Right.
to produce. So I'm just, it's all about the communication. And I don't want you to judge me when I ask these questions, because at the end of the day, we are not the same. We're all different. We're all whole people. We come to work as whole people. And your
Hmm.
definition of a whole person may not be my definition of a whole person. And I find a lot of us have things going on internally which are not easily seen. So I might not be coming to work in a wheelchair. I may not have a cane. I may not have a hearing aid, but that doesn't mean that you can't do something to
Right.
Right.
address my special, unique need that you may not be able to see, that I have to tell you about. Is my long version of what I was trying to say. Because there's so many moving parts to this conversation,
Yeah, it is.
and I think maybe one of the reasons people don't want to share is that they don't want to be judged. They want to be treated fairly, and
And
they're
the
saying, I
stigma.
can produce just like the other person. I just need a little more support than that other person.
Right.
How are you gonna help me? And is that an HR function? Is that a company function?
Cool.
Does
Right.
that have to be part of the culture? I don't know, Christian. Actually, I don't even know if this question is for you.
Not only
Well,
that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I heard a question, but I loved everything you said, Gail. So,
I'm
I
sorry.
love. I think a lot of this taps into creating emotional safety in the workplace,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it's not about so much. My vision, my hope is that someday we won't have to ask for accommodation for specific condition or disability. That we will be able to, you know, go into a workplace and say, okay, in order to do my best job, this is what I need. Within reason, obviously.
Right. Right.
And so, for example, when it comes to neurodivergence in general and ADHD specifically, we tend to. It always helps to have flexibility. So flexibility sometimes of how we're going to do things, flexibility in how we communicate. There are times where I'm going to do a lot better for myself communicating via email or text because I can plan when I do it. Maybe in this minute, I don't want to respond to this email because I'm in the middle of something and I need to block
Hmm.
my time so that it can be really productive.
Right.
Or if I have, phone calls, or if I have interrupting me, that's really going to break my flow. It's going to be a lot harder to be productive. So my choice would be to turn the phone off.
Hmm.
Now, if it's against policy in a company that could impact me and not allow me to be as productive as possible. People with ADHD often have um, greater ability to focus at night in the evening. Now
Mm.
that's not going to work.
In the
If you have an in office
You
Right.
have
type
a
of
nine to
job
five.
often.
Yeah.
But if there is flexibility to do hybrid work or to work from home, that may actually be a great thing for some people with ADHD because they can piecemeal their work and they might do an hour before in the morning before the kids wake up, or they may do and more work during the middle of the day, and then they may do another 2 or 3 hours in the evening when everything is calm and quiet. So but if we don't feel safe enough to talk about this in the workplace, whether it's autism, ADHD, or whatever it is, then we can't communicate. So it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
so obviously there are a lot of different factors.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. But people have some very good points in the comments. Um, Diane asks if ADHD can go undiagnosed and we can be working with others that are experiencing issues, what can we incorporate into the business world to improve culture to support, especially since it could be
It could be missed.
misdiagnosed? That's a valid question. Like, what can we do if you don't know, right? Then you're not able to
Right.
convey to me what exactly you're experiencing, but maybe it might comes up in other ways. But how can I be supportive of that? Like, how can I
Mhm.
support you?
No, that's a great question, and it really goes back to the person with ADHD knowing what they need. So they may not know for sure that they have ADHD, but if you ask most people with ADHD, or even someone who doesn't really know they have ADHD, but assuming that we know they do, I
Yeah.
don't know how to
Yeah.
put it into words.
Understood.
Uh,
Right.
Mhm.
uh, they usually know what works best for them. I mean, there's
Mhm.
always more to find out, but so they may know, for example, oh, I can't, I don't do well in long 1 hour meetings because I just tune out. And that's not, I just, so they may not know they have ADHD, but they may say, oh, I can't do those meetings, so they're required to be in meetings, and it might be a waste of time for them. It might be, they may look bad, so it's not so much about ADHD, it's more about, okay, this person is having a hard time with meetings. Is there something that could make the process a little bit easier? Can someone take notes for the meeting for everybody, and the notes will be posted? So maybe the person tunes out, and they're probably not the only one tuning out, but they have the ability to go back to some of the notes because someone is
Right.
taking notes during the meeting.
Right.
So that just would be like one small example of not so much focusing on the diagnosis, but focusing more on the problem, that the person is having, and how can we find some workarounds. But it still goes back to the person acknowledging that, okay, this is hard for me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a way to make things better.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Robert Berry stated, oh, yes, what are the responsibilities of people, employer, employees, legal versus moral, as it relates to HAZ in the workplace? That's a good question.
I don't really know
We need
because
an HR in this.
yeah, right. I don't have the HR letters,
Right.
and that's
You
not my
definitely
area of
do.
expertise. So I would think that because ADHD is considered a disability,
Right.
my
Right.
understanding is you can only get accommodations if you acknowledge in the
Right.
interview process that, hey, I
If
have
it's,
ADHD,
yeah.
I may
If it's
need
documented, I think, right?
X, Y, and Z. Is that
Mm-hmm.
okay? Then they have legal obligation to. I believe that's what it is. But I probably
You need
I
some.
a, you
I
need a,
agree with you, Christian. I mean, like, I,
yeah.
I can't really answer it either. But if I
Yeah.
was to think of it from the other side
Yeah.
that Robert is raising, the moral side,
Yeah.
I'm saying in today's age of workplace culture, you must know that these things exist. And I would prefer the company that I'm going to work for to be proactive rather than reactive, and have a
Mm-hmm.
policy in place just in case
Right.
they need it, not ignore the person. I'm saying morally and maybe ethically, you should have something in place to manage these kind of people. But I'm not the HR person, and it could really depend on the company, how they feel, and maybe the leader. But it's just,
Right.
I think it goes back to being kind and supportive of the average human being rather than wait for,
Right.
legal requirements in place.
Yeah.
But we'll get somebody from HR to
Yes, because
answer
you know,
that
but I
question
do
for
Let's
Robert.
get them in. Let's
really
get them in.
because
Let's get it. We're gonna get somebody to answer that for Robert. Robert, you can let us know if we did a good job. But I
right.
think that there are responsibilities for everybody as an
I think
employee and an employer, whether it's required, or not.
I I think Tiffany mentioned jazz. I think that's why it's important to disclose to your employer if you're comfortable, so they can help co-create accommodation that works for your individually, right? Particularly if you struggle in the workplace with performance, attendance, etc. So I think it is important to document it if it's something that is going to hinder your work, like what she mentioned, your attendance, your performance at work. Because if they don't know, they're gonna assume that you're just calling out, right? You're just not
Yeah,
showing up or you're not doing your work, and
yeah,
that's
I
what
was
causes you
thinking
to
about
get
that too.
fired. So I think
Correct.
it is, if it's hindering your performance, I think it is wise to document it just for your own protection, for your own
Hmm.
sanity. Because listen, sometimes
Yeah,
everybody's not sensitive or understanding to people.
I
They
agree,
really
and that
not.
kind of
I,
leads into Robert's next question. Sorry,
Yes.
Christian, you can make a comment.
Sorry, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Christian.
oh,
Take it
no,
away.
I think that is the ideal situation.
Sit-
To be able to feel comfortable enough to disclose it at the interview level, and ask questions of how they handle um, the situations or ADHD or neurodivergence, and if there's any red flag, then ideally, okay, that's our time to run and to look for another company. Now we know, not everybody is always in the position of doing that. Sometimes you're
Mhm.
desperate to get a
Right.
job, and so that's when things get really difficult and stressful.
Yeah.
But ideally, yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to be able to disclose it, ask for what we need, and if we can get it, then
Even better, right?
Take our
Yeah.
talent somewhere else.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But you know what, Christian, as well, I something you mentioned earlier. So when you went to your first psychiatrist, they were covered. You were covered if you went to them, but they weren't who you really needed. I think another obligation or responsibility for companies is to make sure that they have somebody who really knows their stuff when it comes to things like ADHD or maybe autism. Like they need to know because well, I think they need to know. I'll just leave it there. You need to make sure that the person is can manage the requests that they're gonna get from employees just in case. But Robert's question was really good. And I was gonna ask you
Right.
that, Christian. So I have somebody working with me. They are absolutely phenomenally amazing as an employee. They can get everything done. They go above and beyond. I don't have to ask. They have, they have initiative, all that kind of thing. But they have special unique needs that help
Mhm.
them to perform their job. So I guess I don't know if that's exactly what Robert is asking, but it's like when you employ somebody and they're autistic, you're gonna get a phenomenal because they're so ahead of the game, but they have special requirements.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm curious. Are there any benefits to having HAC in the workplace? Is there something unique about having it? About having it that can be benefit for for the person and the organization.
Absolutely. So it goes back to how we see ADHD.
Yeah.
Traditionally, even the name ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Hmm.
Disorder. Now, who wants to identify themselves as having a
Having a
disorder? Oh, what's
disorder,
your
Right.
right?
disorder?
That's
And
a very.
so right away it starts with a negative connotation.
Hmm.
So, for decades we've been using more of the medical model, meaning okay, there's a problem with you, there's this condition, there's
Right.
this, it's not normal. So this is where the neurodivergence movement came in and said, well, wait a minute, the human brain is never the same. The human brain comes with a lot of different variations, including ADHD and autism and dyslexia, and it's not, uh, it's not abnormal. It's just the way the human brain expresses itself. And so so from that model, you know the neurodivergent movement looks more at the also the strength, not so much from a problem standpoint, but what are our strengths. And there are a lot of strengths that come with ADHD. So obviously it's a generalization, but many people with ADHD are very creative. So that tends to be something that we see a lot across the board. So creativity, a lot of empathy, a lot of there's also the ability to hyper focus that everybody with ADHD connects to. So it doesn't mean we can't focus. It means that we can't always focus at the time that we want to. But when we're focused, we're
We're
so
focused.
focused that we
That
just, we may be,
yeah,
we may forget to eat, we may forget to use the bathroom, we may forget to,
yeah,
everything else
yeah.
and other appointments. But we're in the zone, and when we get in the zone, I mean, we can just crank out a lot of work and we can do, amazing work. um, and and there are lots of things that once you really know yourself better that can help you get in that zone a little more easily. um, there's people with ADHD often have boundless amount of energy because you know the ADHD brain lacks dopamine, which is one of the neurotransmitters. And
Hmm.
dopamine allows us to get into action and get things started. But so the way we get dopamine is something new happens. So any new event, a new idea, a new thought, a new, that triggers that dopamine. So it's exciting. And that sense of excitement allows our brain to be on and to be ready for action. So we tend to thrive on anything that's new. So a
Hmm.
lot of people with ADHD are great at starting things and have a hard,
Yeah.
tend to lose steam on those longer projects.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
have
Yeah.
to find ways to manage the long projects. But so because of that creativity and that that extra boost of energy we feel with novelty, we tend to always be excited about, it's people with ADHD, often the ones on the team say, oh, let's try this. That's a great idea.
Correct.
I
And
know we can do it this way, that way, and
yeah, you're
but
great
maybe
for change management. You're great for change management. I want you on my
yeah.
team when we're having anything to do with change. But the thing is, Christian, you're really great. But then when it comes to the long, boring meetings, you're still gonna chew me out. How do I? I don't know. But you know what? This is we laugh, but this is such an interesting conversation
It
because
is.
if the people that you work with on your team first and foremost know how Christian operates and how he does his work and what he needs to best be able to perform his work, and they can flex to him and he can flex to them, that makes life so much easier.
Yeah,
There's no push and pull, there's no conflict, there's no, this is Christian, we know he is going to be awesomely amazing, but this is what he needs, and we've got his back. That is for me the
yeah,
biggest takeaway of this conversation. It's
yeah,
all about people, and it's all about the communication, and not trying to make life
And
harder.
isn't this what good leadership is about? To really look
Yes,
yeah.
for where the talent is, and
yes,
really nurture that
Right,
talent
yeah,
yeah,
in
like pieces
people.
of a
yeah.
puzzle,
And
like
That's
ex-
pieces of
true.
a
exactly,
puzzle.
and and this is one thing that I often work on with my clients. Is when I work with professionals on non-parenting issues, I really work on helping people find out what their best um, work environment is, what their best career
Hmm.
is, what their best, because sometimes often people with ADHD kind of like gravitate toward what feels better, because that just makes sense. So they tend to find themselves in better, in environments that are just conducive to performing better. But sometimes they find themselves in the wrong type of work environment where it really goes against the grain, and it's horrible because usually by the time they come see me, they have anything from recurring migraines, insomnia, just a lot of stress, burning out, because they never give up. They always
Hmm.
try to pick up the slack and do more, but they're having to work twice as hard to
This is hard.
to
Yeah,
do a job that is not really their cup of tea.
yeah. Do you think that maybe certain jobs, and I think you just mentioned that maybe based HAD people, maybe based on the industry might be better for them, but they're allowed to flourish more, or is it any job um it's okay for them to do in general? Like creative jobs, maybe healthcare, food industry,
There's
or they could just do any type of job.
there are a lot of variety, but it usually involves things that work for people with ADHD is change. So if
Mm.
it's a very monotonous, very tedious job, where there's no movement, no interaction with people, you're sitting at your desk and you're doing, I don't know, data entry kind of thing,
Hmm.
Right.
it's probably not going to be a good fit. It's probably going to be a
Hmm.
horrible fit. And
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I always joke that my mom was an accountant, and she loved her work, and she talked about work at the dinner table like it was just amazing, right? And I happened to be pretty good with math and good with numbers. So for a while, it made me believe that, oh, I should be an accountant. And I contemplated it for a while. And after a few years, I mean, I never went into that direction, thankfully, but I realized that, oh, yeah, I'm good with math, I'm good with numbers. I could do the work of an accountant, but it would drive me insane because it would be too tedious for me. And I need more interaction. So, there are lots of people with ADHD in creative fields, a lot of them in marketing, design,
Hmm.
lots of ADHD in sales, because the constant interaction of sales, it's something new every time, and it can be high pace and high energy. A lot of people with ADHD in emergency type of situations. So sometimes like firefighters, paramedics, ER personnel. So it's pretty. There's a pretty wide range, but it's I would say movement tends to be very helpful for people with ADHD. So if we can't move, if we're stuck at a desk, then it's probably not going to be a great situation. So so I hope that answers your question a little
No,
bit.
it does. It does. I mean, I think it's good to align jobs that that more natural to you, to your personality, to your, especially HGB being hyper focused. So I think it's always good to find jobs that speaks more to you, because I think that's in general to have, it just makes more sense, and makes life easier for you as a person, whoever that person might be.
Right.
But let's share 3 tips. What are 3 tips that you would like to share for people to take home with them, right? In regards to supporting someone at work who has ADHD.
That's that's the toughest question, because based on what we talked about, also
Right.
depends on
The
whether
circumstances.
the person knows or not. But I would say, more the somewhat broad tips. But the first
Right.
thing is to not deny the difference,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that that's one of my pet peeves. Often when I tell someone I'm ADHD, I hear, "Oh, we all a little ADHD," and and it's
Really?
like, no,
Wow.
we're not. And I know it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of saying, "Oh, but I don't want you to think you're crazy or weird," but it's just denying my lived experience. It
Mm-hmm.
would be like me telling a black person, "Oh, I don't see color. We're all the
Right.
same." It's like, no, we're not all the same. And so we all have different lived experiences, and it's only it's not until we accept that we have a different lived experience that we can start understanding each other.
Right.
So because otherwise it completely invalidates that person's experience. So do not deny the difference. Do not try to minimize it.
Mm-hmm.
And another one is to really seek to understand. Do
Yes.
not do not give advice. Do not say,
Yes.
"Oh, but just do yoga. Just stop eating fast food. You'll be fine." Or meditate. You'll be good. Take this supplement. You'll be And it's like, well, you know,
I know it's not funny, Christian. I don't know what your response is when people tell you that, but that's kind of scary.
no, but it happens. It happens all the time.
Oy!
You'd be so all the time,
Ay,
and
ay, ay.
and so and talk to anyone with ADHD. They'll probably tell you the same thing. People
Oh
love
my
to give advice,
God.
even if they're not qualified to give advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the
So
response? I would have been like, what?
well, I'm like, oh, does that work for you? For you ADHD? Oh, I don't have ADHD. Oh,
That's a good way to
Yeah.
say it. I would have
so
been like, what?
seek to
Wow.
understand, ask questions, be
Yeah.
curious in a respectful way.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
and then the another tip would be to just ask. I think you said that earlier, Karen, but ask if there's something that we can do to make that task easier for them,
Right.
for that person, and or even
Mm-hmm.
asking them first and say, are you
Right.
Yeah.
aware of
Yeah.
anything that could make this process, this task easier for you? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
likely that they'll know. They say, well, this is really hard. I wish I could do it this way. Well, let's start with that. That may not
Right.
be
Mm-hmm.
possible, but let's start with that, because that's,
Yeah.
so being open to that.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's
Those are
great.
really great
Yeah,
tips.
they are. But I also, as far as the last one, I also say, whoever your manager, your supervisor is, or your management, they have to advocate for that person too. Because I learned that. Sometimes I have managers who never really advocated for the employees, right? But I think that takes away, that adds to the culture of the organization, as far as having somebody who's willing to step up and be like, listen,
Right.
this person has this situation. I know so let's figure out how this is how they need the support. So let's figure it how we can make this happen. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's also a good thing to do. Whoever the employee, the manager, the supervisor is, because corporation is one thing, but when you get to the floors and when you get to the actual workspace, is a whole different ball game. So I think the person who you're gonna work under, have to be an advocating person. Not just, I'm
Yeah.
just here to do a job and that's it. Because if that's the mindset
Right.
they're gonna have, they might not be to your favor. I'm just saying
Yeah.
from my own experience.
No, I
You
agree.
know.
Need
I
to find
agree.
another job.
Yeah, yeah,
Karen,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know that. You know that's what you're gonna say.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Need
Find
to
another
find another
job.
job.
Plan.
Um.
I ain't gonna tell you just leave, but just plan accordingly, and then try your exit
Yeah.
out. But
Yeah.
any
I'd like
last words
to. Yeah, I would
before
like
we
to
close out?
encourage people. I know Christian has a one-on-one coaching program that he offers, and I'd
Yes.
really like to encourage everybody who's listening who thinks that they need to have a conversation with him to reach out, because the other tip he didn't
Yes.
mention that I thought, for me, would be how to respond to people who give you strange answers to you. Because Christian, no, I'm thinking these we need to have a script. If I'm telling you I have ADHD and you're telling me to do yoga, I need to have a script because we need to live to see another day because that person may not live to see another day. So I'm just saying, please reach out to Christian. He has been there and done that. He's not just pulling all of this information out
Right,
of a hat. This is
exactly.
from his personal experience. Please reach out. He is a really nice person. He's going to answer
Yes,
all of your
good
questions.
question.
I believe we're gonna have a part two, Karen, because I think one of
I
the
would
things
love a
you and I
part two. I
talked
think
about
Yes.
was
because I have,
we talked
I
about ADHD, but we
I have
also
so
talked
many.
about autism. Remember,
Yeah,
so
I
Christian, you can come
know,
back
I
and talk to
know.
us about autism. We
That'd
have a
be
lot of people, and not only that, parents with autistic children.
that's another.
I think
Yeah,
you're
that's
very
another
good
one.
for parents as well because you come to work
Hmm.
and you don't leave your thoughts about your child at home. You bring your concerns, especially if your child if your child is autistic, they have ADHD. I'm coming to
How do
work
you
and I'm so
support that
worried.
kid?
I don't know what to do, what not to do. So I think Christian is really good for these conversations, but I
Conversation
think we should come back and talk about like autism
for
because
children.
that's
Yeah, supporting
yeah.
parents supporting
So
children. I
that
think.
is it from me. I had such a good
Oh,
conversation,
listen,
Christian. I
I
really
did,
learned a lot.
I
I
did put
learned
your
a
YouTube.
lot.
I added your YouTube. People follow Christian on YouTube, please. Let's blow
Yes.
him up on
Yes, yes.
YouTube.
Well,
Okay, let's
Just
wait.
follow
it's
him all over.
Let's put him
Follow him
on
on
there.
LinkedIn.
I did put,
Connect.
yeah. I put
I
on his
started I started
information.
my YouTube
Yeah.
channel just a couple months ago, and but it's encouraged me to create more contents. There's some short videos, 1 minute, and there's some longer videos that talk more about neurodivergence. It's
Hmm.
more geared toward parents, and in the future I'll probably add more content for non-parents. But there's some, if you have a child with neurodivergence, it's there's some good videos on there that could be helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Christian, any last words before we close? Anything you want people to take away for today or just in general? Any last comments?
Just, if you have ADHD, own it, because it's it comes with a lot of strength, and it's the more we try to deny who we are,
Hmm.
the worse it gets, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the more
Yeah.
problems it creates. So so own it. And even if you're not always, it's a journey, so you may not always be comfortable sharing it with other people, but investigate, research information for yourself, because the more we know about ourselves, the better we can operate, the better we know,
That's true.
what works for us. So
Hmm.
own it.
That's
I
true.
agree.
All right, you have it
I
there,
agree.
folks. But
Yeah.
before we close, I want to say any topic that anybody out there wants us to cover or speak about, please put that in the comments because we're always looking for topics to teach people. People can learn
Hmm.
from, and things that we can learn from ourselves too. So
Yeah.
just put them in the comments if you want to be a guest on the live as well. Um, Send Gail or myself a message, or just put it in the comments. Say I want to be a guest, and we'll contact you.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
hope everybody have a wonderful, wonderful
Thanks
Sunday
for being with
and
us,
be
guys.
blessed. Bye,
See you next
guys.
Sunday. Bye.
Bye.
Gail and Karen, thank you. You're wonderful host. Had a wonderful time
Thank
chatting
Our
with you.
you.
pleasure.
So thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you for coming as well. I appreciate you
Of
accepting my
course.
Yeah.
invitation.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
Bye.
Bye,
See you,
everybody.
everybody.